So SASE, where did this term come from, right? Here at Matrix, we're fairly vendor agnostic in terms of, there's a lot of great solutions on the market, and again, multiple players in SASE. So with that, SASE is a little more of a framework or a concept, right? So the term came from Gartner. As you can see on the screen here, we did have a paper that was called "The Future of Network Security is the Cloud." Again, that was Gartner 2019. It's generally behind a bunch of give up your email address, kind of walls, but any fancy Googling, I'm sure any of you guys that want to actually read the paper out there can go find it. So the really interesting thing here is that, even prior to us all being sent home in this remote work, it was really understood that, hey, as my apps move up, my firewall and security services and any SD-WAN and any of that should be closer to those apps, right? Really the best security is, putting in those, kind of defenses between the end users and the apps. A lot of benefit there. Another concept to this whole SASE outlined in this Gartner paper was trying to get rid of all these little management portals and all these point products, right? To try and consolidate them into a single dashboard to just make it easier, right? Try and delete the complexity, delete the boxes, right? As IT guys, guilty, we get that box sprawl, right? I get another box, and they'll have their individual functions, and they do those fine. But I also get that box sprawl to where trying to manage these things, right? Oh, is it internet? Am I living in the SD-WAN portal? Oh, is it, security? Am I living here? Which flavor of security is it? Again, it's not uncommon to have that spread across multiple different spots. So again, the notion of SASE is that having the data center firewall, right, my one main firewall at the center of my security posture just doesn't work anymore, right? As things move out from behind that firewall, that doesn't make sense. And like all of our other applications, they're cloud native, they're cloud delivered. Doesn't it just make sense to consume security the exact same way? I realize that consuming my apps that way makes sense. Why wouldn't I also consume my security in the exact same consumption model? So we will go through kind of the pillars of SASE, right? I kind of mentioned all those point products. I do want to dig a little bit deeper into kind of each one of those things you're doing. Do keep in mind, again, SASE was just introduced, or this whole holistic concept by Gartner, roughly 1.5 years, 2 years ago now. And, it's really been kind of a goalpost for most of the vendors trying to, rush to that view, acknowledging that that is where we're going. So as I go through these, do realize that some vendors implemented some parts of this, some vendors other. Some vendors actually are there from what we've seen today. So the first kind of really big pillar in my mind is that secure web gateway, right? This is a subset of that next-gen firewall. So this is our URL filtering, and most importantly, getting that visibility, right? Today, we need that visibility. We need that logging. If there ever is an incident, might be an HR incident, might be a security incident, but be able to have that long-term visibility of where we're going, is extremely important today. And then access control, which kind of also couples into that URL filtering, being like, hey, not everybody should be able to, potentially visit every site. With some of that URL filtering also being that the phishing and those other kind of security controls too. So the great part about this being web-based is, again, if I'm on site and my appliance, would, tunnel me or whatever that connectivity looks like to that secure web gateway, it also applies to remote users, right? And it applies to all of my sites. So I don't care if I have one site, 100 sites, one remote user, 100 remote users. I live in this one, single secure web gateway portal to where I can have policy across all of the disparate systems, right? So try and, have consistent policy, but also minimize the box sprawl. Firewall as a service. So again, the two of these kind of make our next-gen firewall, but many vendors kind of display them differently. You often see them split out in, the Gartner paper and other, SASE offerings from the end user or from the vendors out there. So again, secure web gateways very much think about, it's that web, right? If you ever dealt with old web proxies, it's that HTTP and HTTPS traffic. Well, we'd be naive to think that everything is HTTP, HTTPS, right? We do consume a lot of our applications via that method. But right now we're on this, video call that's not HTTP, HTTPS. And we see a lot of, just other protocols that live outside of these web portals. So a little acronym soup here. Again, we are Firewall as a Service, Pillar. So this does provide our more traditional and proven intrusion prevention systems, right? That are IPS, oftentimes signature-based, all baked in, right? Anti-malware, right? We try and stop, our users from getting to malicious sites, but if they do manage to try really hard and click a lot, they might be able to, punch through some of that. So you only have that anti-malware also rolled in to this one unified service, right? The botnet C2, right? This is our command and control server. If they do click really, really hard and manage to bypass the controls we had, they get infected, right? Oftentimes that malware is going to call home to command and control infrastructure. So be able to block those call homes, right? If the malware can't get any instructions, it's essentially can be dormant. We should be able to present that, hey, something tried to call home where we can go do a remediation on that endpoint. Deep packet inspection, right? This is acknowledgement that a lot of our services live at layer 3, right? That's our IP layer. Layer 4, that's our port layer. Well, if we just look at those, we don't have the whole context, right? What's actually the payload of the packet, right? That deep packet inspection. And that parlays right into app awareness, right? Being able to, have these security controls around the actual payload of an application. DNS filtering. As I mentioned, there are several third-party, very known to the industry kind of DNS filtering. As I mentioned, we did see a lot of that deployed for kind of that work from home. It's at least just getting some control over our remote users, opposed to having them full tunnel or there's some mechanism to have them funnel their traffic through our traditional monitoring systems. DNS is also a great lightweight place to do filtering, right? It allows us to say, hey, I know they're going website, but is that a brand new website that just get created? Did someone just stand up this lookalike domain? Is that a lookalike domain, right? To where, we substitute the ones for the L's and all those other things that malicious actors trying to do to fool our end users into going somewhere that they don't want to. And again, this logging, right? When you log where they're going, you also need to log what they actually requested, right? And again, visibility, right? This plays a little bit into defense in depth in terms of, the more layers of security you put in, but also the more layers of visibility give us a better idea of what is happening with our endpoints. SSL, we still see that in the vernacular. Of course, SSL has been dead for quite some time. Secure socket layer, right? All of our encrypted communications, that S in HTTPS, which have now moved on. Most of it, was referred to as a TLS or transport layer security today. That's very important, right? That protects all of our information in flights, right? In transit. We're visiting our banking website, right? Yes, it's web-based, but we want to make sure that we have that end-to-end encryption. And then encryption is great for privacy, but it also can enable attackers to provide malicious payloads over those encrypted tunnels, right? That moat that we set up can't peer into those encrypted connections unless we break them open, right? SSL interception and decryption. The problem with that is it's a very CPU intensive, right? You have an end user that visits an HTTPS site. We need to kind of break that connection at the firewall traditionally, initiate a brand new encrypted connection out to the far end website we're going to, and then mint certificates real time. We're doing this while we're trying to do that deep packet inspection too, right? So it's kind of double duty. So you often see a very oversized, firewall appliance, or again, a third-party kind of purpose-built appliance that has, way too much CPU and RAM, and again, that logging capability with the visibility to be able to do that. However, it is important, right? We are missing, in 2020, middle of 2020, it's estimated that 85% of all web traffic was going to be encrypted. And zero trust networking. We're going to spend a little bit of time here because, this is definitely a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it mean, right? What does really this zero trust mean? If we go back to our traditional firewalls, your normal suspects are SonicWalls and our WatchGuards and our FortiGates of the world, all had a VPN access. And essentially, that VPN, that virtual private network, was just extending out our LAN or our WAN infrastructure to those end users, right? Once they authenticated, traditionally with Active Directory credentials, they're essentially on the network, right? You can do some of that kind of layer 3, layer 4. Yeah, you shouldn't talk to this subnet, you shouldn't need to talk to this subnet. But typically that was for all users, right? It wasn't this identity-based. So the roots of the zero trust is the concept of identity-based, right? I should know who the endpoint is, who the user is. They should be part of some security groups. And I should be able to follow that user around the network, however they're connecting, LAN or WAN, VPN, right, remote users, and be able to, basically tag them. And as Cal kind of touched on, right, if I have someone in facilities, they probably don't need to be talking to the QuickBooks server that's still on-prem, or maybe even the QuickBooks site, through my infrastructure, right? There's just no reason for them to have that kind of access. Additionally, coupled with that identity-based, or being able to actually identify users and only provide them the least privilege, is some kind of single sign-on, really in conjunction with multi-factor, right? Single sign-on allows them to use their same password everywhere. But what if that password walked away from them, right? What if they have horrible password hygiene and like to use the same, password across all sites, right? Something gets breached in their private life, and they happen to use the same credentials on your public or your, private infrastructure. So having that multi-factor authentication is really important, right? Multi-factor presents itself a lot of different ways. Really, it means, having multiple factors, something you know and something you have, right? So it's either kind of that Google Authenticator, one-time password, maybe it's an SMS loop, right, where they text a cell phone, or maybe it's a kind of that next gen, your duos and octas and pings of the world, right? Generally, all SASE infrastructure I've seen support, all of those single sign-ons and multi-factor. And again, that notion of least privilege, right? We should only allow them access to what they really need access to. It shouldn't be a free-for-all, right? It shouldn't be like your LAN switch. So anyone can probably block in your branches and plug right in the network. Maybe you do have a NAC, right? A network access control product in place, right? Another point product that we have, to where, if we can take care of that in the LAN and the WAN, that just simplifies things, deletes another one of these point products. Zero trust, when it comes from that remote access to our applications or on-premises servers, comes in kind of two flavors, right? Our traditional client-based VPN. The difference is oftentimes, which I'll diagram, we're not VPNing into a local appliance. Often we're VPNing into the SASE kind of cloud infrastructure and then doing kind of proxies onto our local. There's also been, through the pandemic and our need for remote access, addition of a clientless VPN, the capability to web browse to something and kind of get a reverse proxy to where my end user doesn't actually have any network connectivity to my applications. We just kind of do a screen draw without needing, remote desktop or VDI or other technologies of that. Typically, we see that always on in terms of this remote access, right? They're always connected to this SASE infrastructure, to where, they utilize the secure web gateway, the firewall as a service, the DNS. We're doing that SSL interception, allowing them to access all of our SaaS and hosted apps through all of those layers of security, right? Allowing us to displace that kind of traditional UTM or firewall we had at headquarters and accessing everything through that infrastructure, in addition to having the least privilege to our applications on site. So always on a full tunnel no longer require us to have that firewall as a single point of failure, that firewall at the data center as that kind of double dip, right? So I have to come in the internet, come out the internet. So again, allowing us to move all of these pillars up into a cloud-hosted infrastructure. Data loss prevention, again, this is just another one of those security, having this capability to have people stop, exfiltrating or having our data leave us, right? These can be things like social security numbers, PAI, right? Personally identifiable information. If we are in the unfortunate position where we do need to store credit cards, which some people do find themselves in that boat, right? We don't want those leaving. Data loss, very much in connection with that TLS or SSL, that's very CPU heavy, right? I'm, yes, at least, breaking up all those SSL connections and doing a deep packet inspection on those. But I also need to look in Word documents, right? Excel worksheets, PDFs, right? That information can leave my environment in a whole lot of forms. So I'll be able to look at all those files, look at all this web traffic, and doing that all in one spot. Again, it's just going to increase our security posture. Here we do enter a little more of the Gartner buzzwords. So CASB, our Cloud Access Security Broker, this was actually coined by Gartner in 2012. This was coined by them when I diagrammed everything leaving our data center. Gartner said, hey, is that traditional firewall even still make sense when those are leaving, right? So even all the way back in 2012, that was really acknowledged that this edge perimeter moat doesn't make as much sense when everything's moved out. CASB can mean a lot of things, a lot of different people, but really the high levels is having some kind of threat protection, which happens to look a lot like our secure web gateway, right? Having some data security that looks a lot like our DLP, having some compliance, being PCI or HIPAA. That looks a lot like our SSL and our DLP with maybe some secure web gateway, and visibility, right? Which really all of these products give us. So really SASE is almost an extension of incorporating CASB and moving it even farther beyond that. And then lastly, user and entity behavior analytics, right? These gets was coined by Gartner in 2015, being that, if we're able to profile the traffic on our network, profile the behavior of our own users, we should be able to run that through an algorithm and get a really good idea of what a normal end user traffic generation and behavior looks like, right? So that's users and the entities was added after the fact, right? This can be our servers and other infrastructure environment, maybe IoT. I keep hearing that's a thing. Maybe you've deployed that in your environment, to where, let's get a good baseline of what this looks like. And if someone all of a sudden starts, acting, contacting maybe countries they don't normally do, or services they don't normally do, or moving a lot of traffic at a time of day they normally don't, or accessing applications from someplace they don't normally do, many of the platforms can surface that and alert on those. And of course, these are all, in one spot, hosted by one vendor. So we all acknowledge that as all of our applications moved out, many of you have deployed SD-WAN to add for that very robust consumption of your cloud apps. Well, if all of a sudden our security is moving out too, when we want very robust connectivity to all of the security layer, which oftentimes will then do direct peering with all of those SaaS applications that we are consuming.